Hey guys, how's it going? Paul Harris here. So I remember when I qualified as an accountant at PwC and I was ready to move into industry, I knew I wanted a more commercially focused role, but the natural progression is to actually move into a financial reporting role. Since I did audit, it is generally accepted that that's what people did. However, I wanted a more commercially focused role. But when you speak to recruiters and you look at job specs for companies, they always require that you had, say, X number of years experience working in industry, or that you have a certain number of years working in a commercial role already. Now, this is always a pet peeve of mine anyway, is generally speaking, when you go for a role, you don't have all the skills required for that role. That's probably exactly why you're going. You want, to expand your knowledge base and to learn the commercially focused areas. So when they say, have you already got 3 years doing the exact same role you're applying for, it doesn't seem right to me, because why would you be going for that role if you'd already done it for 3 years anyway? But that's by the by. But given I'd experienced this, going from a role which is more financially reporting and wanting to go into a commercially focused role, I thought some of you out there might be experiencing this right now. So I thought I'd make a video today that should hopefully explain what commercial knowledge you need to go and apply for these commercial roles, and potentially enlighten you as to why companies want someone from a commercial background in order to apply for that commercially focused role. So hopefully this is useful to some of you out there who are looking to make this move. With that in mind, let's get into it. So firstly, before I get into it, it's worth noting that whenever you apply for a role in finance, generally speaking, the qualities that they ask for, that they need in a person, will always be very extensive. And there is always an expectation of a company that when a person is hired in, that they require on-job training. So you're never going to get a person with all the qualifications that are required, or all the knowledge base, or all the experience. The only time this might not apply is if you're applying for like a director level role where you require serious experience and information. So with that in mind, I would say that if you're applying and you want to move into a commercially focused role, but you don't have that commercial experience already, but you tick most of the other boxes, 90% of the other qualities, I wouldn't let that deter you from applying for that role. However, having worked in a commercially focused role for, say, over 5 years, I should hopefully be able to qualify what commercial knowledge you will need in order to apply for such role. So in a commercial business partnering role, you will effectively be working closely with commercial teams. What do I mean by that? Well, you'll be partnering, i.e. assisting with determining the financial information that will underpin the decisions that assist with commercial decisions. So these decisions could be sales, project, undertaking like joint ventures with other companies, taking on new customers, altering customer requirements, and business cases. So the fact is, you'll be working with a lot of different teams from across the business. A lot of these teams will not have anywhere near the same level of finance background or knowledge that you do. And this is specifically in terms of things like accruals, debt, revenue reporting, debtors, creditors, accounting documentation, and other accounting principles. And generally speaking, this is what distinguishes the role from, say, a reporting side role. However, these commercial teams will instead have a lot of knowledge in their own field and specifics of their own business areas. In particular, they'll know what drives the business forward in their specific areas. They might understand what the customer perspectives are, the product, the regional splits. They may have a breakdown of the financials in a lot different way, focusing on things like yield, products, cyclical trends, competitors, operational issues, and they'll have an understanding of their own internal reporting systems, of how they interpret data and generally like to see data that you might just not have. And this really leads to what you need to know when you're applying for a role, and how you can demonstrate this in an interview. Now, hopefully when you're applying for a role, you will know whether you are partnering for a specific project or a product team or for a region. But in the absence of that information, you should therefore have a range of different factors that you should look into at the company before you start. The most important factor, and the one that I'll start with, is knowing exactly how that company you're applying for makes money. Now, this sounds so simple, but it may not be based on the company you're applying for. Say you're applying for a bank, or say you might find it hard to research that company. And specifically on this note, if you're applying for a subsidiary of a larger company, you want to know exactly what that subsidiary does, not just what the head office does or the company does in general or what its biggest product is. You want to know specifically what the company you're applying for does. But at the very least, you should know what the most profitable products are and the sectors are within that company, and why those sectors are the most profitable. Insofar as, is it because they don't have much competition in that region? Or what is their cost base? Or what is their consumer tastes? When you are thinking about certain products that they sell, see if you can find out what the yield is on the products that they sell. Try and ascertain at what time of year they sell the most and why. If it's a company like Unilever, where most of their products are essential items, you sell them mostly year round. But if it's a confectionery company, for instance, they'll sell during holiday periods, particularly for hospitality industries as well. The main busy times are going to be during holiday periods. And try and really dig into the reasons why. This is what's important with commercial. If there's one thing that I've learned from preparing presentations at work, is that you often have to find out exactly why something's moved. And it's not just good enough to say that something has moved by 10%. And it's not just good enough to say, oh, the reason it's moved is because that's what the data model shows me, or that's what the system says, or an accrual was posted in July. You need to really dig into what that means. What is that exact posting? This is what's important when you have a commercial sense, is to not just be satisfied with a number change. You want to know exactly why something has moved. Has the margin shrunk because of certain competitive pressure, or that there's an influx of certain products within the market within that period? Or is it certain higher level, macro level results, like what's happened with the economy in general? Being able to draw on these commercial factors and making conclusions is often what determines whether you have a commercial knowledge, is taking small pieces of information. And often at times the information is limited that you'll be looking for. So generally speaking, you will not have in a commercial role all the answers. You will have to often draw conclusions from sources from around the business and use your financial head to be able to sense check whether something makes sense. This means being able to translate commercial factors into genuine financial information. And that's part of what the commercial role is. Now, this sounds complicated, and you probably could try and make it complicated by having a very complicated model. But in reality, I don't think it has to be. Really, when I'm talking about using financial information from commercial factors, I'm really saying that you want to be able to have very definite assumptions that when you go to, say, senior leadership and explain why you've created the forecast the way you have clearly defined reasons. If you make a very complicated model, for instance, that has loads of different factors, you're just not going to be able to distinguish those factors when the result comes out. Now, that basically means that you always try and simplify things. So in commercial, it's not about overcomplicating. You want to simplify things, but have definite reasons and definite reasons why. Now, most of the time in finance, when you're creating a model, you're going to be using some form of benchmark. And now that benchmark is often based off last year results or the current year results. Now, why is this? Well, this is the most readily available information and the most known in terms of the factors that affected those results. So, and because of this, when you're going for an interview or you're thinking of moving into commercial role, it's important that you just, identify, you look at last year's results and you try and identify the commercial reasons why those results had differed from the previous year. And that'll give you a good grounding for the sort of information that you'll need to know in your job and for an interview. So if you're ever creating a model in your actual job, you use last year's results, you say potentially that it's moved, say, 10%, but you have reasons why you know that it's moved 10%, because you simplified it and you've come right down to the reason why something has happened. And it's important that you're being able to communicate that, because that is often so much part of what the role entails. Another important thing to factor in when you're thinking about what commercial knowledge you need is you want to know what is happening within that specific market and affecting the company that you're applying for or looking into. Whether it's a global recession happening or a pandemic, you want to know how it affects that company specifically. Think about the company's supply streams. Does it affect their cost base, the fact that there's a recession going on? Do they have largely fixed cost base, or is it a variable based on the volume of the business that they do? In which case, when something horrible happens in the economy, are they able to cut their costs quickly, or do they just have to endure a very high cost base and take on a lot of debt? you want to understand how macroeconomic affects the company, but also what they're driving in terms of their business from a commercial perspective in order to try and increase their revenue. So the list of what commercial information that is required for a commercial role can be quite extensive, but however, on a company-to-company basis, you should be able to find a lot of these factors, and you should be able to come up with some conclusions, particularly if you're going for an interview, as to why the certain larger macroeconomic effects are affecting that company. However, after all this, what I've said, this should give you some indication as why companies like to employ people who have either worked already in a company that sells the same sort of thing that they're selling, or that already has a commercial background. Because at the end of the day, if you've already had these kind of roles, it allows you to move into those roles with very little training, and you're able to interpret the information that's already used, and you don't have to get your head around the new metrics and the new things that drive that business forward. Basically, when you're moving into a finance role, be it commercial or not, it comes down to the transferable skills that you have and you can represent from other roles that you've done. You see, when you have a commercial role, and I've talked about a lot of metrics and wider economy and commercial skills, but commercial roles, unlike, say, finance roles, I think have a larger range of soft skills that you need in terms of being able to operate in that role. Like I said before, you're going to be working with teams that just don't have the same sort of financial knowledge as you, and that takes a certain kind of skill and communication ability to be able to talk to people in a completely different way, being able to ascertain the same information that you require. You have to explain things and break things down into a lot more simple way. There's an assumption that you will know how to manage those different teams. And say you're working on a project and you're managing the cost, you're going to have to be able to bring all those teams together. And these are other soft skills, Part of the point of just communicating is time management, organizing projects, being able to focus on what the key things are within that project that senior leadership want. And, you even have things when you're moving into a company and you're going into a commercial role, that things like being able to just have the system knowledge that is already used in that company. That's another reason why companies like to employ people from similar backgrounds. Now, with all this being said, I truly believe that if you have already become quite astute with financial reporting and that you're actually a qualified accountant, you'll be able to get your head around the metrics that are used specifically within commercial teams. If anything, it's more simple and straightforward because it makes logical sense than, say, trying to work out commercial reporting, that you just have to follow a set of principles or interpret a set of principles. So most of the time, you just need to be able to express that you have the ability to learn those things. And if you tick 90% of the other boxes, you should be fine. But that's basically it. Hopefully, this video, you've been able to pick up some information at least that, commercial factors that you will need and want to think about before applying for a role like this. And it should hopefully give some indication of what you might be asked for in an interview, or what you generally need to apply yourself to when you go into these commercial roles. So with that in mind, thanks for watching. If you want me to make any specific further accounting and finance videos, let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, please do subscribe to my channel and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.